Hey everybody, this is Steve from NZXT and today we are going to review the Rosewill Thor V2 White Edition case. It is a full tower case that fits micro ATX, ATX, eATX, and XL ATX motherboards, so it fits just about anything you can throw at it in terms of the gaming. It is definitely a sort of upper range case. It is around $130 to $150 depending on your purchase location, and it is intended for enthusiasts. It has a couple of really awesome features, so first I want to run through who should be using the case. This case is probably not something I would recommend for the ultra enthusiast. For someone who might have maybe around $200 to spend on a case, you do have better options out there. But if you're building a computer in probably the 700 to 900 range, maybe 700 to 1000 range even, I would say absolutely consider this case because it is a very good value for for what you get. It is a fantastic value. And that said, though, here's what we have for features that are notable. Now, the most instantly noticeable thing, of course, in this video is going to be the Chevron Design top panel that when you slide the switch, it pops those chevron dragon-like blades up. It kind of looks like a dragon spine or a dinosaur spine, and it pops those up, which of course reveals access to one of the fans. There is a top 230mm fan, a rear 140mm fan. Both of those are exhaust. A front 230mm fan and a side 230mm fan. Both of those are intake, and there is room for a bottom 120 or 140 and room for an additional top 140, they say. Now, I looked at the top. There is definitely a fan mounting location for another fan, but I just don't see it happening. It's not going to cool a whole lot. It's right above a drive bay. You really get nothing out of that fan. You might get something if you have some pretty hot drives, though. I could definitely see that if you have maybe a high power drawing front panel display or something to that extent, maybe one of the NZXT Sentries, something like that. But let's move on from the fans, though. They do keep things pretty cool. The case overall runs very quietly for what it is. It has two fan speed controllers on the front panel, and you can see those right here. You can set up the fans any way you want, so I set up my intake fans on one speed controller and my exhaust fans on the other speed controller, and I actually did double up my CPU fan on one of them just because I was feeling too lazy to route it out the back, which is a bit annoying to handle. So beyond these controllers, you also have two USB 3.0 ports with the full 20-pin header, so if you have a motherboard that supports that, you're in luck. There are also, of course, two standard USB 2.0 ports, and then your audio panel, so nothing too original there. There's also an eSATA connector, but not extremely common for these gaming PCs. The front panel is angled up, so it is out of traffic. That way you don't actually break your USB keys when you're walking by. Now that we have all these basic exterior objects out of the way, let's go back to the Chevron Design for just a second. I want to talk about why exactly you would even use it. I actually was wondering myself, why would I ever want to close this thing? Because then I'm just invalidating my top fan and even my CPU fan, which shoots air up and creates a huge heat vortex. So I was trying to figure out, why would I want to close this? Obviously you want to keep it open when you're gaming. So what I came up with and what I tested is you do want to close it for when you are when you're not going to be using the computer heavily, maybe when you're recording a video like this, or when you are going to bed, because it keeps the dust out of the case. So it does keep things clean. It keeps dust out of the top honeycomb fan mesh. You don't need to close it to keep dust out, though, because of the way it is designed, because of the way it is interlaced with that chevron kind of shape. It will keep dust out of there even when it is open, because you have an awning over the fan bays, the 230 and the 140 fan, so that will keep dust landing on the chevrons rather than in the fans, and that's really great for dust control. Now, on the topic of dust control, on the bottom we have an easily removable filter for dust, so you can just pull that out, vacuum it off with an anti-static compliant vacuum, or replace the filter entirely if you want to. So that is a bit better over, say, the HAF X, which has terrible dust control. You have to do it all manually. So that is pretty nice to see. It does have filters in other locations as well. There's a bottom filter for the additional 140 fan, though I didn't see an option to remove it. Looking at the internals, we do see that there are tons of rubber grommets and holes to shove cables through, so it is fantastic for cable management. I have to say, just before this case, I was looking at a HAF X with the same system in it, and it was horrible for cable management. I had nowhere to shove all those cables, and that is in part because I have a non-modular power supply, and it is a high-end power supply, so it has tons of extra cables that I'm never going to use, and I can't remove them. This case has a place to shove them. It has a couple places to shove them, and it does not obstruct cooling, surprisingly, and it also looks pretty good. You don't even see them. They're completely out of sight. So you route everything behind the board for the most part. It has a full, I believe, 25 millimeters back there, which is about an inch of space. So that's big enough for a 24-pin connector's fat cable, and also the 12-volt 8-pin connector for your motherboard. So you can actually weave those over each other and still have enough room. I think Rosewill realized there is no point in having all these grommets in here, all these holes to shove cables through, if you have more to put cables in than pull them out of, or vice versa. So they definitely did a good job stepping that up in terms of design, especially at a $130 price point. You really didn't get that until recently. So kudos to them for that. We also have the now standardized quick switching hot swappable drive bays, so for your hard drives and for your optical drives, but I'll get to those in a second. The hard drives you can face either outward or inward, meaning either out toward the left or in toward the right panel. So if you want to route your SATA cables behind the case, you can absolutely do that. If you want to route them out the left side of the case, where they are obviously a bit more visible but more accessible if you're switching drives pretty frequently, then you can do that as well. So it's nice to have that option. I did feel like the plastic was a little bit flimsy on some of the case, but overall the drives are pretty stable, pretty solid. And the optical drives, now this is where some of the quality comes into question. The optical drive mounting location is very easy to just push in the pin and instantly screw in that drive with no screws, no screwdriver required. You just push in the pin and then slide it to the right and lock it, and that'll hold your optical drive in place. Unfortunately, I felt like it was a little bit flimsy, a little cheap. It almost fell off when I used it the first time. So definitely be careful if you get the case when you're using that. You don't want to break it. It did seem like it was okay. It wasn't going to break, but definitely not the best quality. Again, for a $130 case, though, it is a pretty good value. All of this really helps keep cables out of the way, and it really helps newcomers, especially to cable management. Cable management is not something you necessarily think about the first time you're building a PC. You're more concerned with, how do I not kill this thing by accident? So that's totally understandable, but it is very important to cable manage your system so that you can more easily maintain it later and keep the dust levels down, and of course to not obstruct airflow. Now, this case does make cable management very easy. I'm telling you, it took me maybe 40 minutes to do everything perfectly the way I wanted it. Of course, this was a lot of undoing and redoing, so I do suggest this case for anyone that is a either newer builder, new to cable management, afraid of spending a lot of time on cable management, or you just have kind of a budget. Again, if you are an ultra enthusiast, I would push you towards a more expensive case. It is a good bang for the buck, though, definitely a great value. The build quality is so-so. On the outside, it is pretty good looking, especially the white edition. It has a very sleek look. Personally, not for me. I'm going to stick with the black cases, but it is a very cool look for a white-black case. The build quality overall is solid. I can't complain too much other than that one piece with the optical drive, and of course the filters are kind of hard to get out at times, but really that's not a huge complaint. That doesn't take any points off. Back to the exterior, though, since we're talking about build quality of the outside, you can very easily pull off the top panel and some of the front panel pieces so that you can hot swap or pull out things that you drop in those chevrons by accident, since they're impossible to reach into. So you can pop that top panel off and pull stuff out if you need to. The front pieces that come off actually reveal the external drive bays, so you slide off the one side, basically the right side, you just slide it off, you pull out the cover, and then you shove in your new drive just like that, really fast. So again, big thanks to them for that, for making it easy. I do have to say, though, and I hope Rosewill hears this, I almost dropped this computer a couple times because of there's just nowhere to hold it, and that's expected with these bigger cases. They're unwieldy, they're heavy, there's really not a lot of places to put a grip, so that's okay. What I didn't like was that the top is so easy to remove and the side is so easy to remove that they were sliding around on me, since they're not really secured by very much, and when I picked it up, the front side slid off and I almost dropped the case, which of course the computer and the case would be fine, the floor might not be, but that's another story altogether. So I would have to say be careful picking it up. Again, no huge points off for that, just be careful when you're handling it. You're not going to move it around a lot anyway, so not a huge deal in the long run. There is no side panel, no plexiglass side panel or anything like that, so as someone who has some nice components and some really cool lighting, I was kind of disappointed not to see one. They do a good job at making the black mesh with the massive fan look pretty good though, because of course the massive fan does take a lot of space, a full 230mm obviously. So that is kind of understood. I would say if you really want to display your components, you're either going to have to do a serious case mod or you'll have to go elsewhere. So if that is a deal breaker for you, then the Thor version 2 is not your case. In summation, the Thor version 2 White Edition case, it does look pretty cool. Of course, the white and black are the same in terms of features, so the Thor version 2 by Rosewill does have a great value. It is a large case, which does mean that it tends to be cooler because there's more open air, less area for cables to obstruct. It is, of course, heavier for that reason. It vaguely resembles a Thor from StarCraft 2, if that concerns you, though, so you might be afraid seeing that in the night, but it does have crazy good cable management. In terms of performance, that's the one area it sort of falls a little bit short. It was pretty warm. I averaged, I think, about 50 Celsius with this case, whereas my HAF X was a little bit better. It was more in the 45 range for when I'm not gaming, and that is with an overclocked system. So to keep that in mind, it might be different for you. Your mileage will vary. It is still good at cooling. It's still going to do what you need it to do for the most part. Again, the only people who really have concern here are going to be the enthusiasts. If you want to, you can plug in better fans or more fans, though there aren't a ton of expansion areas. There's one in the bottom and one in the top. That's really it in terms of extra fans. So again, keep that in mind as well when you're purchasing. It does have those nice PSU dust filters that make things nice. The Chevron Design is great for dust. It is very good with dust in general, and cable management. Those are your two big key points. The detriments are just going to be performance. That's really the main one I have. The build quality is a little bit flimsy in some areas, but overall fantastic build quality other than that one optical drive that I've already complained about. So I think it's a pretty good case. If you like it, then definitely like this video, or if you have questions, comment below. Let us know what you need to know about this case. I still have it, so I can answer any questions you have. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe. It really helps us make more, so subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. It's easy for you. Just click that button, and I will talk to you guys next time. Peace.